So, is there life on other planets in the universe? If you have been following the news, China and the United States have just landed their rovers on Mars, and this is getting scientists around the world very, very excited because scientists believe under the surface of the soil there is a frozen water which probably has life. Now keep this in mind as we talk about life on Earth. So let's start with the goal for today. So by the end of today, you will be able to identify and explain some characteristics of living things. And this is characteristic in Thai. So knowing what is a living thing and what is not a living thing is not a small thing. In fact, scientists are always arguing about what is life and what is not. An example is viruses. Scientists are still talking about it. We're going to look at viruses later in other slides, so let's move on. I'm going to share with you 5 characteristics of living things. Now, before I do, you think about the different characteristics of living things that you know already. Look around you. You see birds, you see trees, you see people. What characteristics do they have? So here is number 1, that all living things are made up of cells. And inside the cell is a DNA. Okay, very important. Now, some living things are made up of only one cell, like a bacterium, amoeba, euglena. These are one-cell organisms. And in biology, we call one-cell organisms as unicellular. Uni means one. Now, some living things like this lion on the screen is made up of many, many cells, so they are called multicellular. Example, fish, mushroom, and many more. Number 2 is that all living things need and they use energy. I just finished my lunch because I need energy from the food that I eat. You also need energy from the food you eat. Now, some living things can make their own food. Example are plants and some bacteria. They get the energy from the sun and change this energy into food. However, some living things like this cheetah and mushroom cannot make their own food. They have to eat other living things for energy. Now, the living things which can make their own food, we call them autotrophs. They can make their own food. And those who cannot make their own food, we call heterotrophs. So autotrophs can make their own food, heterotrophs cannot make their own food. Number 3 is that all living things can reproduce and grow. So here are examples, a rhino with a baby rhino. Okay. Now, some living things reproduce through sexual reproduction. What does that mean? It means there is an egg from the female or the mother and the sperm from the father. These will meet to form a zygote and finally a baby is born. Some living things like the bacterium over here, dividing, reproduce through asexual reproduction. And that means one cell will grow and divide into 2 and divide from 2 to 4, asexual reproduction. Number 4 is that all living things can balance their inside environment. This is super important for all living things. So let's look at a few examples. Number one is when you drink too much water, okay, your body will remove some of the extra water to balance the amount of water inside you. The second example is plants. When there's too much water in the plant or too much carbon dioxide or even oxygen, the stomata on the leaves will open and the extra water will go out. Here are a few more examples. When it's very hot on a sunny day, the temperature in the body starts to get higher, and so your body will start to sweat. The water will come out from your skin, and this will cool down your body, and your temperature will drop. This will help to balance the temperature inside you. Here is another example. This is an amoeba in water. When there is too much water in the amoeba, this organelle called a contractile vacuum will help to remove some extra water. Super important. If it cannot do that, the amoeba will get bigger, and it's going to burst and die. Very important. Now, in biology, balancing the inside environment, we call that homeostasis. Homeostasis. And the last point here is that all living things can respond to change in the environment. This is respond in Thai. They can respond. Example is this mimosa plant. If you touch the leaves, it's going to fold. It will respond to the touch. Another example is when plants grow, they will grow to the direction of the light. Okay, another example, they respond to the change. One more example is this fish. When you try to catch the fish, it's going to blow up and gets bigger and makes it difficult to catch. It will respond to you. And when there is a change in the environment, we call this change as stimulus in biology. It's a stimulus. And when we have more than one, we say stimuli. So, here are three examples I want you to think about. Are they living things or non-living things? Number one is a person who cannot reproduce, cannot have babies. Is this person still a living thing or a non-living thing? What about fire, which can grow and get bigger? And a virus, which doesn't have cells, but when it gets into a person, it can reproduce. Okay, so let's start with this person. He cannot make babies, but he is still a living thing because he can still respond to stimuli. He still needs food and energy. He's still made up of cells with DNA. Okay, so he still has many characteristics of living things. So he is a living thing. What about the fire? It is not a living thing because it can grow, but it is not made up of cells. It doesn't have DNA, and it doesn't have the other characteristics of living things. A virus, COVID-19, okay, this one is quite tricky, so I will leave you to decide because scientists still don't know. Okay, so to say that something is alive, we need many characteristics of living thing. Okay, not only one or two, but many to say that it is a living thing. So in conclusion, living things have different characteristics. They are made up of cells, have DNA, Okay, they can reproduce, they can respond to stimuli, and many more. And non-living things can have some characteristics of living things, like we saw in the fire, and grow. So thank you very much, and I hope this is helpful.